Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. Well, we just had the opportunity to watch one of the big events that came to the Meissner intake this year, and that was a tackle warehouse event, which was just broadcast this last week on CBS Sports. And it was really illuminating to see us highlighted on a national TV show like that. And I took away a lot of things from this broadcast that I wanted to pass on to all of you. You know, in seeing this, they had cameras in the boats of the leading anglers, and the anglers would talk about what they're doing, and they expressed what was making it so wonderful fishing the St. Lawrence River. And one of the things that the anglers talked about over and over, the secret to being successful on the St. Lawrence River, was able to understand the drift, because most of them are catching fish by drifting their bait with the current. And it's understanding how the current will sweep past a point. Points are always critical, or, a shoal. And I thought that was really interesting to know. When visitors come here, or when we go out and we want to have a good chance of catching one of those monster smallmouth that live out in the St. Lawrence, understanding that the drift is the critical part of really fishing successfully on the St. Lawrence River. And one of the other things that I found so interesting in watching this was that they talked about the fact that so many tournaments have been held in Meissner. Meissner has become famous for the place to go to have a major tournament to fish the St. Lawrence River. And here's one of the ramifications of that, is all these monster bass are brought back in these boats' live wells. And we talked all about the implications of that. But here's what they found so interesting, that these fish are being let back go into the river after they're weighed in. They're taken in a release boat and put back in the river. And they're not taking them way down the river, way up the river to where they might have been caught. They're letting them go right there in the waters right around Meissner. And they says it seems to be changing the fishing opportunities in our local waters right here between Meissner and Waddington and even Ogdensburg, is that these fish, a lot of them, aren't returning all the way to where they came from. They've taken up a new life in the waters right around us, and it's made it different. And they showed how, of the top 5 anglers, one of them in particular, Shaw Grigsby, was only going just outside the intake and fishing the waters right around the intake in Meissner. And he caught one that was over 6 pounds that they had the camera on that he was catching. And this was really interesting, this whole idea. We've talked about it so many times in the past. Scientists and fishing biologists and anglers have wanted to know what happens to these fish when they're brought back to a weigh-in site and put back in the water there. Do they try to return to where they grew up in, or do they make a new home there? And it appears like a lot of these fish are making a new home right around the Meissner intake. And this is pretty interesting for us to know, that we can put our boats in there and we don't have to go for miles and miles to be able to catch big fish. They live all through the river right now. And I thought that was an amazing thing to watch. The other thing that I noticed is that a lot of the anglers were using like forms of chatterbaits, these baits that wobble we've talked about before. That was what Shaw Grigsby was fishing rapidly over the points that jut out from the shoreline and from islands and so forth. It was really interesting to see these top anglers and how they were so successful in our home waters. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.